All right, y'all. I'm back out closer to the crib. Now I'm gonna go ahead and finish this. I had to switch up my phone. This is a cheaper one, so it might look different or the audio might be different, but I'm gonna go ahead and still finish it anyway. Uh, yeah, like I was saying, so I think like those three parts of the brain are, I guess you could say responsible, but it kind of like they serve as a backdrop because of my overall view of how a soul come about anyway, which I touch on at the end of this. But I say like it serves as a backdrop, even though at the same time she's pretty much inanimate and damn near lifeless. And that's not a paradox, by the way. For example, uh, it's difficult. It's okay. At the part of the story when she's like from the vantage point of looking down from the ceiling, right? She was able to get a clear view of the doctors that were in the room at the time. Now, if you think about it, of course, the optical nerve is responsible for sight. You know, as a fetus or as a developing being in your mother's belly or whatnot, you know, it starts off as an optic stock, as it is called. Later on, as it continues to evolve and develop. And I think after like 2 months, about 2 months, 7 weeks, that's when it becomes an optic nerve. Now, that organ is mainly for sight. Now, granted, it's connected to other portions of the brain as far as the optic nerve, going toward the back of the skull, the occipital portion of the brain. But more so the cuneus portion, because this is supposed to be like the center of vision. So it helps translate as far as those optical nerves, those signals into sight. Now that is created specifically for that purpose. That's how I look at it. But how is it that somebody like her can actually see from the vantage point of the ceiling, not being inside one's body whatsoever? Again, damn near brain dead, completely inanimate though. That's another thing about, because like I say, as far as like the portions of the brain, okay, yeah, you got like, the cuneus responsible for vision, the precuneus, which is responsible, basically helps you remember like scenery and everything attached to it. And then you got like the lingual, which is responsible for dreaming. Then you got the fusiform responsible for like facial expressions, and then like toward the front of the brain, you got the rostral gyrus, you got the caudal gyrus, and then you got the posterior gyrus. So those are pretty much responsible for cognition and emotion, basically. So all these factors work together along with other portions of the brain. As far as like Pam Reynolds' experience, being able to hear and utilize her senses not utilize, but her senses still in effect in real time, and she's conscious of it, and then also seeing from the vantage point opposite of her body at the same time. You get what I'm saying? It's like, I feel like, and then, what she recalled being validated by people that were there also, and nobody came out again 20 years later and contradicted what she had said. I feel like that's another powerful, strong anecdote. And it's basically, it's undoubtedly representative of empirical evidence, especially due to the circumstances of her experience. So I feel like that in itself also proves both out-of-body experiences as well as astral projection. Now, before my phone cut off, now I remember what I was going to say. The portion about her experiences where she talked about like she sees light, I think possibly a tunnel of light, but some type of light. And then other family members, and then I was going to mention Robert Monroe. I believe I did. But anyway, as far as like his experiences in 1958 that he wrote about in his book in 1971 called Journeys Out of the Body, he described the same thing, that he's seen light. And if my memory serves me correctly right now, he also, perhaps seeing family members or whatnot. But anyway, as far as like the relation of both of those experiences, even though I initially hated the fact that she brought that up because it came off as sci-fi-ish, I appreciated, the fact that you still pointed out concrete stuff that cannot be, disregarded or whatnot. It gave me more hope for that. But as far as like the dream portion of her seeing family members, like I said, I feel like I figured it out. I think it's like because he had the experience, like what's that, about 23 years prior to her, because she had hers in 1991, he had his in 1958. So yeah, about 1958. No, I'm tripping. About 32 years or whatnot. About 32 years, 30, 31, 32, whatever. Anyway, he had his way before her, but he described the same thing that was similar, even though I still don't put too much weight on himself. But at the beginning of this blog, when I called it, when I referred to it as like the initial stages of him astral projecting as well as her, that's why I think that may have been true. But I think because you got to be in a sleep state, it would make sense that for people who do it either accidentally or incidentally, that they'll go through something like that to where they are dreaming, but they kind of like jumping border to border into that. And then some people accidentally end up having those experiences, or again, incidentally, such as she did. Now, because I believe that it is a real thing on planet Earth, I look at it like this: people that do that do practice that, because they practice it, I don't think they will have the same experience as far as seeing light and then relatives. You get what I'm saying? Because when they do it, it's more, for lack of a better way of putting it, but it makes the same point. It's still intentional. You know what I mean? As opposed to somebody like her. And even like Robert Monroe, even though he like was practicing doing incrementally and it took him weeks to finally get the experience, the fact that he was still a novice at it, I feel like explains why he also had that dream as well before, if his story is actually true. So again, I feel like that's another powerful one. I would say the next one would be synchronicity. I heard about that as well when I was young. I always thought it was interesting. uh, Gave it more thought later on. This is what I think. I think Carl Jung is the first person to come up with the term. But as far as like the truth underneath the term, I think that has existed for like thousands of fucking years. Like I guarantee you, probably within the next year, I'll be able to pinpoint everywhere in ancient literature that somehow points to that. I feel like that's been for a while. Just like what I said in the last vlog before this, when I was talking about Zabdiel Boyston and then the first slave who came up with a cure or a way to remedy smallpox. And I was talking about like the tradition itself coming from West Africa being lost in the annals of history, and that being the first time it's documented. It's kind of like the same thing as far as synchronicity. I think that's something that existed for a long time ago. It just ain't really been pointed out acutely. It's been referenced, but not really pointed out acutely or specifically. That's how I look at it. But anyway, as far as him also being a student of Sigmund Freud, but turned out more exotic in his beliefs. Like he had a patient, a lady or something like that. She had issues or whatever, and she was supposed to have been somebody that was like real. I don't think they used the term practical when I first read about this, but basically somebody that's like they never stray away from a plan, like real, like an inflexible, stringent type of person in her thinking at the same time. So she kept having dreams about beetles also. So in her session with Carl Jung, as she's expressing herself or whatever, he heard some type of tapping on the window. Come to find out it was a black scarab beetle. And He walked to her. Basically, he had like I don't want to say moment of clarity. I want to find a more neutral way to put it. That was his own enlightenment as it regards the concept / notion of synchronicity. You know, he took it like it was a sign and what a beetle represents, which is renewal. He basically was telling her that she needed to get more in tune with herself, and I'm trying not to put it in corny language, and I don't want to repeat the language that I wrote, but basically like become more whole in a yin yang sense. You know what I'm saying? In every aspect of it, basically. So from that point onward, that's when the concept of synchronicity was born. So it's basically like this. It's A manifesting B, and C thus being like the hidden meaning between both A and B. So the beetle will represent, okay, her issues. Damn, it's hard for me to put this shit. Like, okay, what she was going through or whatever. Represented less than being whole, to put it simply. And being that she kept having this dream about the beetle. This beetle represented B. And C was the message, you know what I'm saying, of becoming whole. It's hard for me to explain it, you know what I'm saying. Like, I give another one. It's a better one. It's a real life example that went on between me and one of my siblings. We was cracking jokes one time. I say he looked like something. He said I look like a horse. I say he looked like something. You know, we just going back and forth. And I kid you not, about 10-15 minutes later, I turned on the television randomly, just turned it on, and what was it, Family Feud, I think it was. Yeah, Family Feud. And the question was like, name a horse or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Now, there's been plenty of experiences similar to that, but to use the formula I just put forth as far as A manifesting B, thus C being the connection between the two, it would basically be like this. Me and my brother going back and forth. That's A. B would be the manifestation on the television. C would be, okay, nigga, you look like a horse. You know what I'm saying? That's pretty much the principle for every form of synchronistic experience. Now, me personally, I always thought synchronicity was true, but I never agree with the third aspect of translation. My way of looking at it might be viewed as dark, but I just think it's true. I think A does manifest B, but I don't think there's a such thing as a C. It's just like a random manifestation based simply off intention itself. So that aspect is true, that base aspect. But as far as the extension of it, or what I call the extension, that being a significant meaning between the two, I highly doubt that. But I don't doubt I guess you could call it like a mystical expression of reality, you could say, because I think it's still different from cause and effect in the normal sense. You get what I'm saying? So I don't agree with the base of it, but C, I disagree with it. And as far as like trying to figure out how it work, like, I don't know. I guess I'm looking at it like this. Okay, as far as like people that think it's far-fetched, when I was pondering about this deeply one time, I'm like, how can I come up with a way to verify to myself that this is real? Logically in my mind, I swear, it makes the most sense to me, and I think it's real. One could always say, yeah, you had these experiences whatsoever, but it's the whole thing about explaining it. So I'm like, okay, I thought about it. I'm like, shit, if it's all about manifestation and attention, but not like applied attention, I'm like, what if I look in, because I know, you know, what if I like look in a dictionary and look up a word that I know for sure I never heard before, and then see if the word comes up in life somehow, if it expresses itself. So I tried that before, and not to sound crazy, but logically, as far as me being a I'm a person that believes in this. So I'm like, I did that before, and I'm like, okay, that verified to me that it's true. When you look in the dictionary, you'll know for sure if it's a word that you heard before, you just never paid attention to it, or if it's a word that you know for sure you never heard before. You know what I'm saying? So you look up a word that you know for sure you never heard before, and less than 2 weeks, no more than 2 weeks actually, the word will come up somehow, but you can't necessarily put your conscious focus on the word. You look it up and you know what the word means and you remember the word, but you just go on with your life or whatever. You don't sit there and look for it. Somehow it's gonna come up, whether on television or somebody randomly using it. You might be taking care of business, you might be paying bills if you're not paying them online, or you might just be taking money out of your bank, whatever the case. And somehow that word will come up. That's one way to look at it, one way to test it. Now, as far as explaining it and making it more simple, and I got 10 minutes, I believe, so I'm finna be quick. Explaining it and making it more simple. You know, people got different ways of explaining synchronicity. I thought about a card game one time, spades. Now, you know how you play spades, you got 4 persons. Let's just assume there's no team. It's 4 persons playing spades. Each person get 13 cards. There's a total of 52 cards. That means with the hand that I got myself, regardless of what card I choose to throw out, based on the total amount of cards itself, there's 676 ways that game could play out for me. You get what I'm saying? But collectively, for all persons together, there's 2,704 ways the game could play out, period, regardless of who throws what hand, whatever, what card or whatever. There's 2,704 ways the game could play out, period. I calculated that. So I'm like, shit, that could be used to describe synchronicity, basically. It's like, okay, it's almost like, because I believe in indeterminate determinism. So I believe that in free will, but because I believe in synchronicity at the same time, it's like the action that you take and that which is measured as synchronistic actions, you still got a few billion other people. You got at least 6 billion other people on the planet. And then you got to think about the region that you're at. And then you got to think about things that's going on with them, whether they're consciously aware of the concept or not. So it's like a zigzag, crisscrossing, intersecting of different, you know what I'm saying, different people. So you could choose an action, but just like this card game, it's like it's almost like a determined domino effect bouncing around based on the action that you take, but at the same time you got other people taking the same action. So going back to the card game analogy with spades, if you got 2,704 different ways for the game to turn out regardless of what card is played, but you got 4 individuals and they all start out with 13 cards each. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like that. Think about that game and apply it on a human level. But look at it more so like on a human level, our options are a little bit more innumerable. You know what I'm saying? But as far as the analogy itself, how synchronicity plays out, that's the analogy I came up with to help explain what I think about that. So yeah, synchronicity is real. I was gonna speak on telekinesis, but I don't know. I may not. We'll see. I'm gonna get through this though. The next one is the Hindu concept of a soul. Now me, and this is perfect, to end this video. As I was saying in the beginning of this, I believe in a soul, but I think it's basically volition, but it's broken down into 3 subsets. Now, at the same time, me believing in indeterminate determinism, as well as things that could be perceived as mystical and parapsychology and all that type of stuff. I think a soul is real, but I think it manifests after the manifestation of the human brain. I don't think it predates human beings. But I do, I'm going to put it like this. It's something that I'm going to say at the very, very end of this. that, you know what I'm saying, certain people that might disagree with my perspective, they'll kind of appreciate. But as far as like the soul, I don't think that it existed before human beings. Now, based on the Hindu concept of soul and karma, for example, they believe, well, I'm gonna say as far as that concept, a soul comes into being following or once something forms. That's when you get the manifestation of a soul. So when I was fairly thinking about this a long time ago, I'm like, all right, you can't be talking about like ants. You can't be talking about single cell, you know what I'm saying, beings. You can't be talking about bacteria. You can't just be talking about gases. You can't just merely be talking about particles. I'm like, that just don't make no sense. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then the whole thing is like, okay, once a form manifests itself, then it goes through successive stages until it finally becomes or manifests itself into a human being. Once it manifests itself into a human being, if you do not reach enlightenment, a state of enlightenment while on earth, you will continually go through this death cycle. You know what I mean? Until you do. Once you do, after death, you become one with the heavens, basically. And it was a concept that I had to look at it again today because I had forgot the name. But it was basically a deity. But there's 7 of them. The one is Bugar Loka, I think, or whatever. But it represents one of the 7 dimensions from the earth, between the space between the earth and the sun. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, okay, that's basically going past the atmosphere. So you're going past the troposphere, you're going past the stratosphere, the mesosphere, thermosphere, and then the exosphere, all the way 93 million miles away toward the sun. Within this space, though, symbolically speaking, within a symbolic description of this space, human beings that have, or beings that have manifested themselves into human form, those who have passed away after reaching enlightenment, somehow inhabit these dimensions. I just was like, oh no, it's like, okay, anything, okay, because I believe in indeterminate determinism. Anything random could happen. Like you could get a comet that's officially that's huge enough to where it could wipe out the planet, or hit the planet and explode it, and then or it could, or something inevitable as far as like the sun burning out, for example. Like that's something that's inevitable. Like what about something like that? If somehow life continued to exist on this planet, and regardless of the weather patterns and all that type of stuff, we still exist, so we may evolve with it while others may die out if they don't evolve along with that, right? Okay, what about the inevitable factor, like if the sun burn out, implodes, and become a fucking imploding star, and then eventually turns to a black hole? What about like something like that? That would inevitably cause death way before it gets 20% to that point. So I'm like, if that happened, I'm like, that just doesn't make sense. And then I'm like, okay. Then another thing is, how would you fit extraterrestrial beings into the concept of reincarnation? You know what I'm saying? Or karma. You could throw karma in there, but basically manifestation of the soul. How do you fit alien beings with, obvious abilities and so-called technologies that are far beyond the human beings? If you see orbs in the sky and they manifest into the form of material UFOs and back into these lights, but these lights are so freaking bright, they look like the sun, but you're able to look at it without it burning your eyes. That's a whole different foreign principle as far as physics. You know what I'm saying? I give Noel, no offense, Noel Lewis the credit to study that type of stuff. That's how different those principles would be. So if you got like undeniable cases, like one that happened in Phoenix, Arizona, for example. I think that was 1997. That was a while ago. But the governor at the time, his name was Fife Simonton, right? Now he didn't. I remember when that happened, by the way. Well, as far as me being young, looking at it on television or the news, I remember the guy with the alien costume. Like, what about their whole circumstances about those orbs in the sky that formulated into like a V shape, and then many people call it on camera. The fact that this guy denied it at the time, but later on he said it. He said it was a cover-up. He admitted to it, that they was told to, cover everything up, blah, blah, blah. Now, this guy, as far as my understanding, I don't follow him, but the last that I read about him 6 years ago, though, he didn't run for office again, and it wouldn't make sense for somebody like him to just come out. It like the attention that he would give, it just wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't seem like it'd be some type of publicity, but it wouldn't turn out to be good publicity. That's how I look at it. But anyway, as far as that's an undeniable example. There's many others. But if you rest your case on that example, or you say, okay, you be fair, you yield to that, how do you fit the concept of the manifestation and the successive stages of this materialization of a soul into a human form? How do extraterrestrial life fit into it? It seemed to not be able to fit into that. You get what I'm saying? Which means there is a degree of egotism in the concept itself. Now, it comes off as dark, but like I say, me, myself, I do believe in God, because like synchronicity, I just look at God as kind of like impersonal. But in my opinion, that adds to the majesty of God, like synchronicity, for example. And I'm the first person to point this out. I think synchronicity is one of the signs of some type of personal, if you want to use that word, communication with a higher force or God. Again, which would fairly also represent A, manifesting, B at the same time. But the relationship and the inner mechanism will still be impersonal, not in the form of a speech. That's my personal view of that. So that's pretty much let me make sure I ain't forgetting nothing. I think that's all. Yeah, that's basically how I look at it. I know, I know what I was gonna say, but I'm wait to the end of this. Now that's pretty much my view. 60 to 65%. It's a lot of stuff that I kept out on purpose. You know what I'm saying, for future purposes and all that type of stuff. Even like historical references, like with an astral projection. Like I was gonna point out something in Egypt, but I'm going to save that for a later blog that's more related to the history of Egypt somehow. I ain't even going to point that out. But like I say, I got so much other stuff, but I think this is about 60 to 65%. But in doing the research for this stuff, right, I was reading about melanin. And I'm like, okay, it had brought a question in my head. I don't have the complete answer. Of course, the first humans had melanin, right? But when I was reading more about it, I'm like, okay, as far as the processes of it, okay, you get the ultraviolet rays from the sun. It penetrates all the layers of the sky, hits your skin. That's when it develops what is called, oh, I thought my phone cut off. It develops what is called cholecalciferol, which is useless by itself. That later becomes vitamin D once it absorbs into your skin. Then its receptors grasps to the blood, to the proteins in the blood, and as it flows through the blood, it goes to the body, but it goes through the liver and then the kidneys. Once it goes through the liver and it goes through further mutation, its code name is 25 hydroxy cholecalciferol. Then after the liver process, as it continues, it goes through your kidneys, and then further mutation happens, and then this code name to describe this mutation with these added ingredients is 125 dehydroxycholecalciferol. All right, so that's what happens. But this is also described as the process of oxidation. That is what fucking interested me, which means what? It is different from an organic process starting from a fucking fetus, for example. But it's like an intrinsic process at the same time. Now, what am I saying? Okay, a baby, for example, majority of black babies, when they come out, what happens? A lot of them, as far as their skin complexion, they end up becoming darker. Why? Because they get those sudden bursts of exposure to the sun. So their skin also goes through an oxidation process, because when violet rays hit your skin, it damages your skin, the DNA in your skin. So that activates your melanocytes. Now, this is going to make sense. I'm just trying to explain this as logically as I can. It's a lot. It activates your melanocytes or whatnot. Now, that is located, basically it comes from your gene responsible for melanin, which is called melanocortin receptor 1. That is located on chromosome 20 in human beings, right? Now, this is the thing. Follow me. I'm trying to make this quick so my phone don't cut off. I'm surprised it's at 31 minutes. This is the thing. That this part that I'm about to describe is different from oxidation of melanin. Basically, I'm leading toward the question of when did fucking melanin first hit human skin? But I'm going to describe this as I'm going. Okay. As a young fetus developing in a woman's belly, the first layer of skin, the outer shell, it is called embryonic ectodermis. All right? This is what's interesting about this, as far as people of color in general, not being racial, by the way. That also consists of melanin, and that portion later on develops and becomes 90% of your fucking skin layer. Now, as far as like this embryonic ectodermis, you got the mesodermis, which is the middle layer, and then you got the epidermis. I believe the epidermis, right? But still, as far as like the keratinocytes, which makes up the majority of your skin, that's that fucking 90. That's the ectodermis as the start. But it's weird because like when ultraviolet rays hit your skin or whatnot, and it damages your DNA, basically damages your skin cells or whatnot. This is when melanin basically regenerates itself, and these melanin receptors, or really not receptors. They're called they're not receptors or whatever. They just basically like they exist within melanin cells in liquidy form. It's called melanosomes. They get activated to interact with the keratinocyte cells, which is your skin cells, and they replace it. So when I talk about like a baby, when you think about black babies or darker skinned babies, when they come home and eventually become dark, that's because when they get exposure to the sun, they go through the oxidation process. So it's replaced. But see, there's a distinction between the two, and the ectodermis represents the more organic form, I would say. The oxidation is more the later form, but it's still intrinsic due to evolution. Here's the thing. When I was reading about this, I'm like, wow. I'm like, okay, shit. I mean, I'm just asking a question. Like, when did, like, okay, let me say this right now. It is a scientific fact that, you know what I'm saying, the first human beings were people of color. My only thing is, at what point in the evolutionary line did, skin begin to exhibit melanin? Now, it was something on Wikipedia that did sort of answer the question, but not really. They were like, about a million years ago is when pigment came into being, or melanin being expressed in humans. And I'm like, okay, I'm thinking about it. So I'm thinking about the other stuff that I read about it as far as doing the research for this. And then my next blog that I'm thinking about doing, I'm like, okay, I'm reading about the bonobo apes and chimpanzees and howler monkeys and gorillas and all this type of stuff, right? Now, as far as like the evolutionary line that I know about, okay, you got the Australopithecus africanus, Australopithecus afarensis, you got the Homo habilis, and excuse me for putting the phone on the side of my mouth, but you got the Homo habilis, you got the Homo erectus / Homo ergaster, Then you got Homo heidelbergenses. Then you got Neanderthals, and then you got Neanderthals. Of course, they were in the Middle East as well, in Europe mainly, but the Middle East as well. Then after them, you got Homo heidelbergenses, right? Oh, damn, I'm tripping. No, I'm tripping. Wait. Yeah. You still got the Homo heidelbergenses, which also branched off into Homo sapiens, early Homo sapiens, over 100,000 years ago. Okay, but as far as like the split between, you could say chimpanzees, but there is a distinction today based on what I read as far as bonobo apes and chimpanzees, because their line split about almost 1,000,000 years ago, between 890 and 860,000 years ago. But as far as human beings and us splitting from them, that was about 4,000,000 years ago. So I'm like, okay. And reading about the bonobo apes, I'm like, let me check out their features, like not just their features, but like the melanin. So I'm reading about the melanin of different animals, right? I'm looking at this stuff, I'm like, okay, as far as like the bonobos ape, they look black, right? That's just the fur. Underneath that, they have a white pale complexion. So I'm like, okay, damn. So as I'm going typing and all kind of shit, I can't find nothing specific. So I just started thinking about it. I'm like, what about the gene expression of melanin in animals, period? Now, as far as like melanin, you got like 3 different types that are expressed in human beings. You got eumelanin, which is the black to like brown color, the dark black to brown color. And then you got pheomelanin, which is kind of like reddish to yellow color. And then you got neuromelanin. And that's just basically the coloring of the inner portions of your fucking brain. I mean, not just your brain, but like your, I think near the brain stem, something like that. But as far as the first 2, those are the main the main ones that I was thinking about when I was trying to figure this out. Now, reading about this, I knew about the gene on chromosome 16, actually. Chromosome 16 that's responsible for melanin production in human beings. And I knew about its multi-functions, basically. Like, it wasn't just responsible for color. I understood that. The color, the pupils, the inner portions of your ear, all kind of stuff, right? Cartilage in your face, your hair color, hair texture. I knew about this, but I didn't know about this other gene that was called, that is called a Galty, Agouti. Now, I'm reading about this gene, right? Now, they're talking about other animals that has this gene, right? That's how it starts off when I was looking this up on Wikipedia. So, like, you got I think it's called, but anyway, you got certain horses, for example. I almost called the name of this particular horse, but it's like a brown horse, but it has black legs. And this horse, as well as other animals who exhibit different colors around their body, they possess a gene called a Galty gene, and a gene or whatnot. Also, I think certain chimpanzees also, but I know for sure like certain horses or whatnot, there's a Galty gene. Now, in human beings, the Galty gene exists on chromosome 20. Now, this gene, this is what I didn't know. I'm thinking like, okay, as far as pheomelanin, that also exists on chromosome 16, but I was thinking like that'd just be like a L. You know what I mean? I didn't know it would be like a whole different gene, and that humans would also have that gene, and that gene in humans is also responsible for pheomelanin. Of course, both of those genes interact or communicate with each other, thus one gets expressed. So I was like, wow. So I thought about animals. I'm like, okay, so if we come from bonobo apes as human beings, and you look at their complexion today, they have a white, like a more of a pale complexion underneath their skin. I wouldn't think I don't know that. I'm just thinking like, okay, basically like an animal, like a Galty gene in human beings, for example, could also be expressed, and it is expressed for certain people that got like reddish color hair, but also freckles and stuff like that. You know, you got little mutations and things like that happen as well. But I don't know. It's hard to explain it, but I got enough through. I'm gonna leave that open. Basically, my question is this: at what point in human history did melanin develop? Of course, I am of the belief that the first human beings were black, but I still find it interesting as far as the successive mutative stages toward that. In other words, like an animal can have that expression as a gene, which they do, but at what point did it mutate to develop into going from like colored fur to the actual skin of the entire body being this color? That's what I want to freaking know. You know what I'm saying? Like, I understand, like, you can't get the recessive from the dominant. I understand that. But as far as like the mutation of the Galty gene and the, well, I would say just mutation, but you know what I mean? Because animals also possess the gene for melanin, for black or black, thus brown melanin as well. But at what point during this interaction between both genes throughout the different lineages and stages of the development and evolution of the human being, at least going to, I wonder, like, at least to Homo heidelbergenses, you know, like about them, like, what was their skin type and complexion as well? What color was it? You know what I'm saying? At what point, if it goes even further beyond that? And I'm talking about when, because I would say that it should be obvious that like the texture and thickness of human skin is obviously different from apes, you know, especially the fact that they are much stronger. I don't know, I just find that interesting. That's one question. The last thing I'm gonna say real quick, which I was saying like may kind of like, you know, some people might find it like, okay, I could think about that. This whole thing about interdimensions or different dimensions. Now, this is what I will say. That's a scary thing if it actually is true, if you think about it. Like, most people that think about stuff like that are obviously into things that get their brain spinning. You know, it don't matter who they are in life. They get their brain spinning. That's something that, if you consider to be actually true, think about like the search for knowledge, for example. If you're a person that just love to think about all kind of stuff, if you got a such thing as like multi-dimensions and all that type of stuff, and it's infinite, that means the plane that you exist on right now, that you operate in your thought forms, all that knowledge is false in the first place. So you're basically just racking your brain for no reason. You know, it almost would be like saying like you working out now, but by the time you get like, say you like 30 something, you're working out so much right now, possibly by the time you get like 50, your body gonna be more worn down. It's kind of like that. Say like if that was actually true, wouldn't that make a person, I'm not saying this about myself, I'm just saying completely objectively speaking, wouldn't that make a person begin to feel like a strong void in the inside? I don't know. I'm gonna leave it at that for now. But yeah, this is a metaphysical addendum. Y'all have a nice one. I'll holler at y'all next time.